We're back, and we're going to be going over the New York Mets offseason plans now that we are through pretty much the division series, the playoffs, and we're going to unpack everything that happened with the Mets and what their plans are for the remainder of this winter and what they're going to be doing to help improve this team and make them better in 2026. So lots to get into. It's going to be a long one. Let's roll the music. Welcome to Mike's Mets Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Pichota, and welcome back. So this is, I have not done an episode in quite some time. I'm going to be definitely a little rusty. And the reason for that, and if you don't want to hear like my personal reasons for not doing anything the last month and a half or so, you can just skip past this. I'll include the chapter of when I'm actually going to talk about the Mets. But there's some personal issues. I was going through like a depressive episode during the beginning of September that was not unrelated to the Mets, but was, probably an indirect cause of what was going on. But I just get like seasonal depressive at times during September, and at times it can be worse than other times. And there were a lot of contributing factors. Work was tough at the time, and I had like physical issues that were going on, but the mental health thing was more of the more pressing concern, and I was just going through a lot at that point, and it definitely was kind of talking to friends and family about it, but probably not as much as I should have been. And because of that, it really did kind of throw me for a loop. I didn't really want to get into anything, and then at the same time, the Mets were kind of collapsing, which wasn't helping anything either. And I was getting, I would be getting like texts from friends and family who would just be like, trying to commiserate about how bad the Mets were, and and that would just kind of like fuel my depression even more because I didn't really want to talk about that. And then and that's no one's fault. People are totally entitled to vent, but there would be times I was like, I didn't have anything to say because I didn't have anything, because I just didn't want to make myself even more depressed than I was. So it's tough when you are going through like a depressive episode like that. Really like lean on people much more than I was, because if I could do it again, I probably would have talked to my parents, my brother, my my other family members, my friends more than I was. But enough of that. Let's get into the Mets. And obviously, this was not the ideal scenario of how I saw the season playing out, how most Mets fans saw the season playing out, even when we were in this doom spiral of things going as badly as they were. There was still the thought of like, well, they can still pull this out. It felt like the other wildcard teams were decently far back enough that the Mets could still take the final wildcard spot, and then the Reds just kind of fired through that final part of the season. At the same time, the Mets were collapsing, and this all played out very similar to 2007, 2008 with the Mets. Not the least of which was the issues were pitching related, and in 07 and 08, our pitching staffs similarly collapsed and fell apart, and we didn't have the necessary starting pitching to kind of lean on. We didn't have an ace in those seasons either, and history kind of plays out exactly the same way. And if there's a common thread to every one of these late season collapses that the Mets have had, it's that the pitching staff was not equipped to support it. And part of it is on David Stearns. I'm not going to give him a free pass just because he got unlucky. But they were definitely destroyed with injuries. A lot of the depth was taken away. Tyler McGill, um, Griffin Canning, all going down with season-ending injuries, and it felt like a Tommy John fire sale was going on at the same time. There were players who they were counting on to be healthy and available at the end of the season, like Reed Garrett. He went down. Jesse Winker was hurt the entire season. Max Kranick went down earlier in the year, and the list just keeps going on and on. Sean Manaea didn't start until halfway through the season. Frankie Montas got hurt. So everything that Stearns had kind of been planning and expecting for in terms of like, well, I'm going to build up a pitching staff that's going to be built more on depth. Once your depth is gone, there's really nothing to really lean on at that point. And the pitchers that he did have, he just didn't really have an ace in there, and hard to expect that like Kodai Senga would just like fall apart like he did in the second half of the season. Same for Sean Manaea, and I can understand Stearns' reasoning in terms of like why he didn't go after like a ace at midseason. Not that one was available. Like, let's not kid ourselves. There wasn't any like pitching available for him to acquire at midseason. Maybe he could have found a reliable starter, but I don't know what the asking price would have been. And the only person who would know that would have been David Stearns. So if he didn't feel comfortable with doing it, I'm going to kind of defer to his judgment in that case. But I understand what he thought which was, I have Kodai Senga and I got Sean Manaea, coming back the second half of the season. I got those guys are my 1 and 2s. That should be enough to get through. But in 2024, he didn't have any better options. His pitching staff in 2024 was Luis Severino, Sean Manaea, David Peterson, and Jose Quintana, and Tyler McGill. I mean, he didn't have like an elite pitching staff. He didn't have an ace to lean on. It's just that those guys didn't get hurt. His health was pretty good. He didn't have Senga. Senga was out for the entire season that year. So really nothing was different. It was just that these guys didn't get hurt and weren't breaking down the second half of the season. That clearly Sean Manaea was never fully healthy. I mean, he had said that there were the loose bodies kind of like hanging around in the elbow, and that he still technically doesn't have to get surgery for it. I would probably say get surgery because I don't know if he's going to be pitching any better until he gets that figured out. But that's entirely up to the Mets training staff and their decision as to whether or not he should be getting surgery or not. But him not being healthy, and then Senga having to be sent down at the end of the year because he had just gotten so erratic, was just, I mean, these are completely unforeseen circumstances, and Stearns, to his credit, had like kind of planned on this. I'm like, well, like I don't know if I'm going to have Clay Holmes for the full season. I don't know if David Peterson's going to like struggle or not. So I'm acquiring guys. I'm getting Griffin Canning. I'm getting Frankie Montas, and these things just didn't work out. I mean, like to have this many like season-ending injuries is a string of bad luck that you really can't anticipate. So maybe getting better pitchers was probably a better move than Canning or Montas, guys who had a better track record. But it was something that had served him well in the past, and it's really hard to kind of say that he had kind of botched this when in fact it was just a matter of really bad luck and a matter of really degrees in terms of the team going from 89 wins last year to 83 wins this year. It's just a matter of like 4 or 5 of like 4 pitchers really getting hurt weren't hurt last season. So you can't anticipate health problems like that and just eradicating his depth. And he had guys to lean back on. He knew he had a farm system of AAA pitchers, guys who he could bring up who could theoretically take over should anybody get hurt as well. And he brought up Nolan McLean. McLean worked. Jonah Tong and Brand Sprout were not quite as polished. And the Tong thing was distressing in terms of like how ill-prepared he seemed to be taking on Major League pitching. They rushed him up there. It wasn't really his fault. I feel like even as well as he was doing AAA, the same things that he was doing well in AAA do not necessarily account for when you're facing Major League hitting. And I really love his stuff. I think that the rise in that fastball is so great. That changeup, his arm angle, it all makes him very effective. He's got to find another pitch. That curveball was not working for him as well as it was in AAA, and part of it is just Major League hitters are just more disciplined than AAA hitters, and you have to kind of figure out the best balance in terms of debt. So I fully anticipate Tong will start the year AAA. He's probably not coming up until he is really found the right groove in terms of using all three of his pitches in a manner that's more similar to someone like McLean. McLean found it almost immediately, and he knew what he was doing. If there's a knock on McLean, it's probably that there are times where his command and control don't work as well as other times. There's times he looks unquestionably the most dominant pitcher maybe in baseball, other than Paul Skeens or Tarek Skubal. And there are times that he's just putting runners on, and it's getting like dicier and dicier the more he's walking guys and giving up base hits. So he has to, as effective as he was, there are still things for him to improve upon. And of course, teams are going to have more data on him. They're not going to be falling for his approach, which was a lot of sweeper sinker, and I think he can stand to improve on working in his curveball a little bit more, and finding a better place for that sinker. There were times the sinker was misused, but it's really difficult to find any kind of fault in what McLean was doing. He was just dynamic. Brandon Spur, I'm going to get into in a little bit in terms of what was, in terms of what his future is with the Mets. But I really wanted to kind of turn my attention to their offseason plans rather than just kind of complain about what was going so wrong with the hitting. And really talk about what the plan is going to be for the Mets offseason. So we're going to get into that right after I take a break. So, as I said, I'm rusty. I've part of the of taking so much time off from talking this much is my voice is absolutely cooked. So if I'm a little bit raspier than I normally am, it's because I'm just not used to talking like this. This is a pivotal offseason for David Stearns and the Mets front office, Steve Cohen. They have a big job ahead of them. Not the least of which is they have to hire basically a whole new coaching staff. Other than Antoine Richardson and Carlos Mendoza, the manager, they have to get a new hitting coach, new pitching coach, new first base coach, or third base coach, and it's going to be a lengthy hiring process, probably for all those positions and the coaching staff. There's a lot to be done there. Clearly, the hitting coach and the pitching coach, Chavez and Hefner, and I like Hefner. I don't like Chavez as much, but I like Hefner. But when you're presiding over the worst pitching collapse maybe in the history of the franchise, and you're seeing your staff go from one of the top 5 ERAs in baseball to one of the top 5 worst ERAs in baseball. You got to answer for that, and frankly, there were enough adjustments that were being done for my satisfaction on the part of Hefner in terms of fixing this pitching staff. As things were kind of falling apart, and I'm like, how did David Pearson go from an all-star to a guy who had a 5 ERA during the final 2 months of the season? What happened there? How did Kodai Senga's mechanics get so wacky at the final end that they couldn't even keep him at the major league level, and they had to send him down to AAA to sort of fix himself? How did Shao Manaea go from a pitcher who was a borderline all-star in 2024 to a guy who was so completely unreliable that he was banished to the bullpen? Their best option of the entire year was Clay Holmes, and that's really not what you need. So they really need to figure out something better in these cases. And I was also concerned about what was going on with Jonah Tong. How come he wasn't? It felt like he and Tong weren't on the same page. There were a lot of things with Hefner that I was getting more and more frustrated with over the course of the season. And I know he wasn't dealt the best cards, but you got to make those cards work. And honestly, because it was working so well in the first half of the season, it doesn't stand to reason why they would just fall apart. They weren't terrible pitchers. They were average to decent pitchers, who were just all of a sudden became completely hittable. And whatever they were doing in terms of their mechanics, their pitch selection, whatever it was that was alienating them so much, it's on the pitching coach to sort of fix it and come up with a new game plan if the game plan that they had been working with wasn't working anymore. So let's talk players here. So and let's start with the bullpen, and because this is going to be the lengthiest part of the process for for David Stearns in terms of fixing his this pitching staff, because he just has so much to kind of replace. He has to replace virtually the entire bullpen, because he has multiple free agents who are not going to be. He's got multiple players who are hitting free agency now. So starting with Edwin Diaz, who's going to opt out of his contracts almost definitely, and Diaz deserves to opt out. He had a fantastic season again. This was a year where I actually couldn't figure out like when he had experienced any kind of trouble. Like in 2024, there were those moments where you were like, I don't think he's ready to come back. He was blowing saves left and right. I don't think he had. I have to check this, but I don't think he had consecutive blown saves at any point during the season. He was very polished and cool and collected and just dominant the entire season. He was basically the only person that they could lean on, and Mendoza leaned on him heavily. There was a lot of times down the stretch where the bullpen was really screwing up, that he had to keep going to Diaz for multiple inning relief performances, and Diaz did it like over and over again. He stepped up. He was absolutely terrific for them down the stretch, and he deserves to cash in free agency. And the hope is that the Mets can bring him back. I think he wants to stay in New York. I think he likes the place. I think he likes the clubhouse. But they have to bring him back because they don't really have a better option here at the closing position, even though there are going to be multiple relievers hitting free agency as well. Diaz is going to be the top reliever on the market, and there are going to be teams who are going to be trying to acquire him. For Diaz's contract, I would probably anticipate somewhere in the realm of like 3 years, $72 million, or maybe 4 years, $80 million, depending on the kind of contract that he wants. I'm going to assume that he wants something more guaranteed, more length, if possible. But 3 or 4 years for a closer seems about right. His market value is going to be around 18 to 21 million, based on the other contracts that have been given out to relievers like Tanner Scott and Josh Hader over the last few years. So I could definitely see Diaz signing somewhere in the realm of like 4 years, like 80 million for to stay on as the Mets closer, and they should give it to him. He absolutely deserves it. So besides Diaz, they also have to replace. So these are all the other relievers who are hitting free agency this year. I also want to mention AJ Minter is going to enact his player option. He will be back in 2026, hopefully for the entire season. The expectation is that he should be ready by spring training. If not by spring training, then earlier in the year. If there are no setbacks with him recovering from his injury, which thankfully didn't require surgery. But the hope is that he's going to be healthy for the entire season. But as we've found out, health is not always a guarantee. So besides him, Ryan Helsley, who was a disaster, is hitting free agency. Helsley should not be brought back under any circumstances. I was thoroughly unimpressed with him. Tyler Rogers, also hitting free agency after the Mets trade for him as well. Gregory Soto, also hitting free agency after the Mets trade for him as well. Ryan Stanek, no, please God, no, don't bring him back ever again. And then I had said it before, but Reed Garrett is... he's not hitting free agency, but he's not going to be back next year because of the Tommy John surgery that he had. He's not going to be pitching at all 2026. So that's another reliever that they have to replace. So in total, so that's Diaz, who they have to re-sign, Rogers, Helsley, Reed Garrett, Gregory Soto, and and Ryan Stanek. So quite a job for David Stearns to go about in terms of he has to fix that entire bullpen. So he has to rebuild that entire bullpen. And the only guys that he knows for sure are going to be back are Huascar Brazoban at this point, and the other host of relievers. Daniel Nunez is not going to be back in 2026, probably until maybe the end of the year, if at all. So that's a question mark as well. So and I also forgot to mention Brooks Raley also hitting free agency. So The Mets absolutely need to be bringing back Diaz, as I said. They should also be re-signing Brooks Raley and Tyler Rogers. Tyler Rogers was not like brilliant. He was fantastic in the first half of the season, pitching with the Giants, but for whatever reason, just wasn't as good with the Mets. Not to say that he was bad, but his performance was just not quite as dominant as he was in the first half of the season. So I could knock that up to just unfamiliarity, or just being in a position where he wasn't totally comfortable. But they should absolutely be focused on bringing back Tyler Rogers, who was who is one of the best relievers in baseball. He's just been fantastic over the last few years, and and is a guy you can really count on as a particularly good setup man, which they are desperately in need of. And then Brooks Raley, things were definitely set up for Raley to fail. I think this was missing all 2024. And then coming back in the second half of the season, they signed Raley basically as insurance. They weren't counting on Raley to be like as indispensable as he was, but with injuries to Danny Young and then AJ Minter, who also both of whom were gone for the year, it Raley became basically indispensable down the stretch, and they really needed him. So that was but he was fantastic. Just really, really, really good for them, and they should really be looking into bringing Raley back, particularly because of there aren't that many quality lefties hitting free agency. So they can trade for somebody, but just bring back Brooks Raley. He was so good for them, and deserves a nice 1 or 2 year offer to re-sign him. So besides those two, or three actually, including Diaz, you also need to sign a number of other relievers. So you have to fill basically 3 other roles in that bullpen. One of which is going to have to be another lefty, just in case AJ Minter is not ready to start the year. So I was looking at Steven Matz, who did a very good job for the Boston Red Sox this past season. Really, really sharp for them, and Matz is familiar with the fan base. Obviously, grew up in Long Island, and homegrown guy, and I would like to see Matz brought back as a left-handed option, just in case the Mets can't, just in case AJ Minter is not ready to start the season, and they need another option in that bullpen besides Raley. So I would like to see Steven Matz brought back. Speaking of former Mets, Phil Maton was really good in Texas this last season. Pitched his heart out. Real great numbers for him, and I'm really excited to see what he could do with this team. 32 could definitely give him a 2 or 3 year offer, and he again knows what he's doing here. Like the fan base is familiar, and he pitched really well for the team in 2024. So and I was a little upset that they weren't able to re-sign him. But Maton really, really good. I know he didn't pitch well in the playoffs last season, but I would be very excited to see Maton be brought back as a right-handed option. Certainly better than Helsley or Ryan Stanek. And then finally, Jacob Eunice, who Met fans might not be totally familiar with. Pitched for the Giants primarily over the last few years, and then most recently with the Cleveland Guardians in 2025. But one of the sharper righties that's going to be hitting the free agent market, and one that might kind of fall under the out of the spotlight enough that the Mets might be able to jump on this guy, but he was really sharp. And as a 7th inning reliever for the Mets, this could be a huge upgrade over Ryan Stanek, Ryan Helsley if they bring in Maton and bring in Maton and Eunice. That would be just a really big improvement for that group. So as it stands, this is my plan for the offseason. It's just re-sign Diaz, Raley, and Rogers, and then sign another lefty if they need one, but also Maton and Eunice. So my other option was, this is not a signing, but we have another bullpen spot here, which the final bullpen spot could be going to Huascar Brazoban, but my thinking was, rather than give it to Brazoban, who had a weird year. I mean, obviously there was that massive implosion in the middle of the season, where at the worst possible time, Brazoban could not be counted on for anything. They had to send him down to AAA again, which is this is back-to-back years that they've had to do that with Brazoban. Now, to his credit, when he came back up at the end of the season, in September, he was really good for them. He was actually like their only other good reliever other than Edwin Diaz and Tyler Rogers. At the same time, Helsley was kind of messing up left and right, and they needed someone else to step in there. And Brazoban did a really good job for them. So I do give him credit. But rather than bring back Brazoban, my thinking was, okay, so let's go another route, and let's bring in, rather than bring anyone else in, let's move Kodai Senga, who... This is obviously it's using a guy who's a starting pitcher and then having to move him to the bullpen is not ideal. And Senga's track record in the past has not been great in terms of being used as a reliever type situation. But this is my thinking, which is I'm watching the Dodgers and I'm watching Rookie Sasaki, who was terrible for them as a starting pitcher, but has been brilliant as a reliever. And Sasaki also was not a guy who would start games particularly fast. Was not pitching great in the first inning, and the same applies to Senga. Senga is traditionally a slow starter to these games. He doesn't pitch well for the first inning, and by the second inning he kind of calms down. By the third inning, it kind of goes bad for him again. So maybe it's more of like top of lineups that really are more of the issue with Senga, that he doesn't really do well against these top three hitters. But he is a guy who does have, there is ability here. Like, he does still throw that like ridiculous forkball. Pairs it with a good fastball. If he can just figure out his mechanics and figure out what has been screwing him up so much, this is a guy who can be a multi-inning reliever for them, which is obviously we saw in the early part of the season when they had Max Kranick and Huascar Brazoban and Reed Garrett all pitching multiple innings, as the starting pitching wasn't going very deep in the games. They were leaning heavily on those three guys to pitch multiple innings. It can be very helpful to have a guy like Senga who can come in every couple days and pitch 2 innings of relief if needed, and as long as they're good innings of relief, it can be he can be a very useful weapon out there. So I don't think he could do worse than Brazoban. Maybe Mets fans are like, keep Senga in the starting rotation. They don't really have a lot of better options. I'll get into what I think they could do to improve that starting rotation, but I feel like Senga just doesn't have the confidence of anybody in the front office, most particularly David Stearns. David Stearns at the end of the year did not look particularly enthused or excited about Senga, and this is a guy he didn't sign, his guy he didn't necessarily want, and if they don't outright cut Senga at some point, I think the move to the bullpen might be enough to salvage him, but this is just a theory I'm working on, but I wouldn't be surprised if they went this route. So, if they don't end up like trading him or cutting him, then move him to the bullpen, see if you can get something out of him in that role. If it doesn't work out, then go ahead and dump him off. So that's my plan for the Mets bullpen, and let's now move on to the other most distressing issue for the Mets, which is their starting rotation. This was one of the worst units in baseball by the end of the season. They were they were running out pitchers. David Peterson, as I said, just was completely unreliable at the end of the year. And their best starting pitchers were Noel McLean and Clay Holmes. And that's not really where you want to be in terms of your starting rotation. I feel like you should be having something a little bit better out there. Just a thought. The Mets, fortunately, there are going to be a lot of options on the free agent market this offseason. They don't have to tie up all of their negotiating time dealing with Juan Soto and trying to acquire someone like that. Other teams can kind of focus on Kyle Tucker and Alex Bregman. I'm more focused on starting pitchers like Framber Valdez and Dylan Cease. These are my two my only options for this team in terms of you need to bring in an actual starting pitcher here. Framber Valdez has been one of the best pitchers in baseball over the last 4 or 5 years. Basically since 2019, he has been a consistent force for the Houston Astros every season. This guy is just lights out stuff. This last year was probably his worst season, and he was still really, really good for the Astros. Definitely their best pitcher for, I would say, other than Garrett Cole and Justin Verlander, he's been a reliable top of the rotation starter, and it's probably one of the more underrated weapons in baseball. So I would highly be interested in bringing in Valdez. The drawback is that Valdez is older. He will be turning 32 this November, and that's old. I mean, like, you're on the wrong side of 30. You're not going to be getting probably any better from this point on in your career. And if there's one thing that we've seen with Stearns is that he's very wary to give out long-term deals to starting pitchers. And we could probably see maybe like a 3-year deal offer to Valdez, but I don't see that Stearns really giving out more, and I don't know if Valdez is going to take less than that. Like, Valdez is going to be looking for a 5-year offer, maybe even 6. I don't know if he'll get that, but there are teams that are going to be mightily interested in Valdez. So the Mets can probably offer a higher AAV than probably anybody, but if it comes down to like length as opposed to that, then Valdez might be more inclined to take the long-term offer for less money per year, just for more guarantees, more security, and it may behoove the Mets to kind of go away from that and give him that 4 or 5 year deal, because Valdez is just unquestionably the best pitcher in the market this offseason. Dylan Cease has also been very good. He's just a very up and down performer. This last season was not good for him. His ERA is higher than it actually is. If you look at his FIP, he definitely was getting screwed by his defense on more than one occasion. And if there's like a concern with him, is that there are like times where he can just kind of go bad, like early on, where he just doesn't have it, where he can be giving up. He'll either be walking players, which he did a lot in 2025, or he'd give up a lot of base hits, which he also did a lot in 2025. He balances that with a fantastic strikeout. He was number 1 in strikeouts per innings pitched, innings pitched per 9 innings. So he was just dynamic in that regard, but everything else that he's doing is there are times where he can be, those things don't affect him. Sometimes his walk rate is not as bad as other times. Sometimes his hit rate is not as bad as other times, but he keeps the ball in the ballpark. I do say that, like, that's probably his best thing, is that because he's primarily single ball pitcher. But this is a guy who things can kind of go wrong with him in a big way. He's younger. He's 29. Giving out a multi-year contract to someone like Cease is probably a better option. I think something that Stearns is probably more interested in, because, and truthfully, I mean, any contract offer that they're probably going to be giving to Dylan Cease is going to include some kind of opt out after like 2 years anyway, because someone like Cease is going to be gaining a lot of interest in the free agent market, and it behooves him also to just go ahead and sign a deal, but get yourself out of it whenever you want to. So I would say probably after 2 years there would be like an opt-out anyway. That would be my expectation for any kind of contract with Cease. So you can sign him to a long-term deal, but I would say he's probably hitting free agency anyway by 2028. So you can sign him like that, but there are the questions of whether or not you can keep him. So either option is good. I'm I'm not opposed to either option. Really, they just need somebody who can take the ball every fifth day and get a shutout performance. Valdez is the better bet towards that, but Dylan Cease can also do that. We've seen it with Cease in 2024. He was phenomenal. He was one of the top 5 pitchers in baseball in 2024. 2025, very, very inconsistent. So you really don't know what you're going to be getting with Cease, but sometimes it can be fantastic. Sometimes it can be even better than Valdez. Other times it can be much, much worse. So either Valdez or Cease as your number 1 starter. Then you have Nolan McLean. And then I'm like, we need another starting pitcher in here. Like you need another quality starter out here. You can't be, again, this is if they opt to move Kodai Senga out of the starting rotation and move him to the bullpen, which is my plan, then you lean on someone else in that sort of like third role, which is the expectation is McLean would be the number 2, but who's taking over the number 3 spot? And my first thought is Sandy Alcantara. And Alcantara is coming in on a very affordable contract. He will be he will opt out after 2027. There's a club option. There's a club option in 2027 that they can enact or not enact, and they can choose to bring him back if they want to at that point. But his contract is very affordable. So they only paid him $17 million in 2025. It'll be another $17 in 2026, and then the team option is 2027 for $21 million, and they can buy him out for $2 million if they decide not to go that route. So it's effectively a 1-year deal that they're trading for, and we have seen Stearns do that in terms of the relievers that were hitting free agency. That I just mentioned, he had no option. He had no difficulty, making those kinds of deals, even though he didn't know for sure that if he was going to keep them or not. So I would say that and the lack of you can get a potential frontline starter for less than $20 million is fantastic. It's the rub here, the caveat is that we do not know what Alcantara is going to do in 2026. 2025 was obviously an up and down season for Alcantara. His first half was terrible, an ERA over 6, I think. Second half of the season looked much more like the Alcantara of old, particularly down the stretch. The Marlins were really leaning on Alcantara, and he was giving them the Alcantara of old. 7 innings. 1 or 2 runs or earned run allowed. I think the ERA was in the 3s and looked a lot sharper for them. And I really am interested in if Alcantara is back to his top tier form in 2026. That could be a huge boon to this Mets pitching staff if they can get a looking more like Cy Young caliber Sandy Alcantara. It really is. It would be a tremendous improvement over someone like Kodai Senga. Now the trade would definitely have to require the Mets dealing one of their top prospects. Nolan McLean should be pretty much off anybody's radar. They're not trading McLean. Jonah Tong, I also think, is untradeable at this point. It would have to be a really, really, really interesting offer, for a top tier pitcher like Paul Skeens or Tarek Skubal. But the Mets aren't trading for one of those guys. So before they deal Tong, they're not dealing one of those 2 guys. I do see Brandon Sproat being dealt in this trade, and probably at least 2 other prospects, probably top tier reliever, starting pitching prospects. Someone like Jack Wenninger would be one. So that would be, and then maybe even an AJ Ewing, who's been doing very well for the Mets in AAA. So these are all interesting options to include, but the Mets have enough farm system prospects to deal away for someone like Alcantara, and for it to not make that much of a dent. I mean, it would definitely hurt them, but acquiring someone like Alcantara, especially if Alcantara is starting to fix himself up and look like the Alcantara of old, it would be a big improvement. The other option that I was looking at in terms of trades would be Logan Webb. And the Giants are kind of tearing it down, and Logan Webb's been their ace for the last few years. One of the best pitchers in baseball. His season, he finished 15-11, 3.22 ERA, his best strikeout rate of his career. Struck out 224 batters, led the league in Ks, and only allowed 46 walks. So his peripherals are just terrific. Had a 2.60 FIP in 2025, which was not the best in the league. Obviously, Paul Skeens being in the league is going to affect your Cy Young chances, but this guy's a major Cy Young candidate. Seemingly every season, these back-to-back All-Star seasons, he's young. Alcantara is turning 30, or is 30. Logan Webb is turning 29 this November. So. Acquiring him would be huge. Now, this would definitely have to take Jonah Tong away from the Mets, and I'm curious if the Mets would do this, but it would definitely take Tong. It may also take Sproat to get Logan Webb away from the Giants, and it does feel like the Giants are in the process of this roster has been a 500 team the last 3 seasons. They're seemingly stuck. Logan Webb's a great pitcher, but it doesn't feel like he's a great fit for that team. And dealing away an ace while you're in the middle of a rebuild, they were trading away Tyler Rogers, and they made the trade for Rafael Devers earlier in the year, but that trade didn't really work out that great for them. And Logan Webb is going to be due a lot of money over the next couple of years. He was $12 million this year, but his extension offer that he signed is going to give him $23 million a year for the next 3 seasons. 23 for the next 2 seasons, and 24 for the final year of his contract. And then he's going to hit free agency. So this really depends totally on whether or not the Giants actually think they're going to be contenders going forward, and if they're going to. If they would be more interested in making a trade for someone, if they would be interested in trading someone like Webb, who again is one of the, I would say Webb's a top 7 pitcher in baseball right now. I think he's definitely 7th, but he's been electric, particularly 2025. It looked like he had really hit a new plateau, or reached a new plateau for him. And I think the sky's the limit. This guy being as young as he is, and potentially being available if the Giants make him available, I would definitely love them to start trading away guys. Even someone like Tong, and if it include like Tong and Sproat, maybe even another pitcher. It's worth it, I think, in that case, to bring in a guy like that, and you're hopefully signing another top tier ace. Pairing those 2 guys with McLean and then David Peterson and Clay Holmes, while leaving also room in that starting rotation for Sean Manaea, who's hopefully healthy, and then potentially somebody like Christian Scott, who is going to be back in 2026 as well. So there is talent here if they can make the moves here. If they can make one good signing and make one good trade, that starting pitching rotation looks 1,000% better. These might be a little more pie in the sky. I don't know if Valdez is possible. I don't know if Webb is possible. But Ceason Alcantara is, at the very least, I think, very doable for the Mets, as long if they can put through the appropriate offers here, and don't try and they have a definitely a well built farm system here. So I would love them to make that trade and that signing for one of those 4 for 2 of those 4 players. We're set there. Okay, so that deals with the pitching staff here. So who else do we have to sign? Obviously, re-signing Pete Alonso is going to be a major priority. This is not a guarantee like it was last year. As long as it took to re-sign Alonso in 2000 after the 2024 season, and ultimately took, I think it was 4 months for them before they finally came to a contract. This was. God, this took so long. I feel like it's going to be just as long and drawn out a process. The difference is that he's going to get a lot more offers this year. Obviously, he's going to be hitting free agency without the qualifying offer attached to him. He's just hitting as a unrestricted free agent, and without that restriction, there are going to be teams that are going to be looking at him. The New York Yankees should be one of them. However, the major drawback to Pete, and one thing that's going to throw a lot of teams off is, one, he's going to be turning 31 next year. Two, as great as he was at the plate, and he had one of the best WRC pluses in baseball, this is a guy who definitely creates runs, and it really helped him a lot that he had guys like Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto in front of him. I think that was huge for him in terms of his stats. We saw that in his RBIs, that he was driving in a ton of runners, and he looked a lot better in terms of what his approach at the plate. He wasn't striking out. I mean, he was striking out a lot still, but you could see that in terms of his batting average, that how much that shot up. He did so well for them, but there are teams that are going to be looking at him and saying, okay, well, you're a little bit older, you have a definable skill trait that is, it's definitely declining. Like, he is declining, like in terms of his power hitting. Like, his home run numbers are starting to slip, and maybe he goes to somewhere else that's more of a hitter's park, and sees those numbers go back up. However, the biggest issue is that his defense is just horrendous. So he was one of the worst defenders at the first base position, if not in all of Major League Baseball, then definitely the National League. But he is just a guy you cannot be. They can't be starting him at first base anymore. You have to move him to DH. And fortunately, they have a spot open with Starling Marte hitting free agency. They're not going to be bringing Marte back. I'm sad to see him go, because I think he's a really positive clubhouse influence. But I just don't see Marte coming back. And you move Alonso to DH, it really solves a lot of your problems here. I mean, you have to find another first baseman, which I'll go into in a second. But moving him to DH would be the way to go, just in terms of helping your overall defense here. He just doesn't have the appropriate range. His throwing arm is really terrible, and he's not going to be improving at all at this point in his career. He's just not going to be getting any better. And this is not like a one-year fluke. He was as bad as he was last year. His only saving grace is basically that he's really good at picking bad throws out of the dirt. That's basically the only thing he does really well. He just doesn't really move well enough to his right. He doesn't have the good enough range out there, and again, the throwing arm is just really terrible. You can't count on him at all to make the throw to first or the throw to second, throw anywhere. He's not useful in any way, and it's just a huge drawback to their defense. So moving the DH, Alonso may not like that necessarily, but basically, I think it's going to be the approach of every team that's going to be looking at Alonso is probably going to be like, you're not a very good first baseman. You need to be moving to DH. That's why I'm like, people who are like, oh no, are the Yankees going to sign Pete Alonso? I don't think they have really any interest in signing Alonso. Alonso would only be able to play first base for them because Stanton's taking up DH, and they can't play him anywhere else. So he has to play first base, and this is a team that already has really bad defense. So I don't see the Yankees being major players for Alonso. They may get in negotiations, and they may just sort of jack at the price on the Mets, but I could see Alonso re-signing with the Mets for 3 years, $100 million. I think he knows he's not getting a long-term contract from anybody, but a 3 or 4 year deal is definitely in the cards, and he should take that, especially if it gives him enough. If it's high enough AAV that it'll interest him. And if it's over $30 million, 3 years, $32 million or $33 million, it's definitely something I could see him doing. So let's call it 3 years, $100 million. He would resign. I think he wants to stay in New York. Again, the Yankees are probably not going to make him a compelling offer for him to move, and it would not be in their best interest to sign him anyway. So he said that he wants to stay in New York, and he wants to stay with the Mets. It's just a matter of if Stearns and Cohen can construct an offer that would be interesting enough for Alonso to stick around. He blew his chance at a long-term offer when he wouldn't resign. He wanted to hit free agency. That ship has sailed. You got to take whatever offer you're going to be getting here, and if you're really committed to this team and you want to stay part and you want this to be one of the great homegrown Met players of all time, get your number retired, you stick around here. You stick around here for as long as you can, and you keep hitting home runs. You keep doing what you're doing, and with those two guys in front of him, Lindor and Soto, who are there for long term, they're not going anywhere. You're going to keep getting those opportunities to drive in runs, to see your stats really explode, and it's going to be huge for him in terms of his production. They just need to find some guys who can get behind him and give him a little bit more protection, which they have not done, and that's going to lead into what they should be doing with Mark Vientos. So this is going to be a twofold option that I'm going to throw out here, and this is going to be improving one position and also taking away a distressed asset. And as I said before, Mark Vientos was not the guy that they ultimately thought they were getting in 2025. He really fumbled the ball. This was a season where he really needed to play as an elite power hitter, and basically except for 1 month of the season in August, we didn't get that from Vientos at all. In fact, he really screwed them over at the end of the year as well. So the entire season, we were kind of waiting for Vientos to sort of figure it out, find that groove that he was in 2024. It never happened, and I'm frankly tired of waiting for Vientos to figure it out. I was really disappointed. He gets in the season where they really needed him to step up and become that reliable 4th or 5th hitter. He just it never worked for him. It never happened for him at all. He was doing basically everything the same. He just wasn't hitting the ball, and so I can't deal with Vientos in this role anymore that he's been in, which is they're like waiting for him to sort of step up. Move on from him. Just move on from him. And let's improve something else for this team. Let's improve the center field position, which was easily their worst position of 2025 besides third base. The entire season was Jose Siri, it was Tyrone Taylor, and it was Cedric Mullins. Cedric Mullins sucked. There's really no way to like sugarcoat that. He was terrible. He was absolutely terrible. Jose Siri was also absolutely terrible. Besides breaking his leg almost immediately at the beginning of the year, which was not his fault, but wasn't really doing anything for them either. Before he got hurt, and then after he got hurt when he came back. Also didn't do anything for them either. So, it was an attempt at potentially finding somebody oh well, this guy at least is a very good defender, and maybe he can figure something out with the bat if he stays healthy. Didn't stay healthy, and ultimately was not good for them. So Siri and Mullins both not good. Tyrone Taylor does have his benefits here. He's just not a guy you can start every day. He's not an everyday starter. And as great a glove as he is, and as great as a base runner as he is, he's just not an offensive player. You can't be starting him as a ninth hole hitter. You can find people who can give you production from the ninth hole more than Tyrone Taylor. And so Tyrone Taylor, I think they should absolutely keep him. I think he's a great fourth outfielder, but he's not anything more than that. He's a ideal defensive replacement late in games type of player. He's an ideal pinch runner. He's an ideal starter guy if somebody gets hurt or they need a day off. Not an everyday player. I'm sorry, I really like Tyrone Taylor, but not a guy you need to be starting out there every day. This is where Vientos comes in. You trade away Vientos and you acquire a center fielder, and this is easier than it sounds. I've looked long and hard for anybody who would be really worth it to trade for, who could actually fill that position and be an everyday player in terms of as an offensive player and a defensive player. There are very few. One of the options would be Harrison Bader, has a mutual option in 2020 for the 2026 season. I don't think he's going to use it. If he does hit free agency, I would be very interested in bringing in Bader on a 1 or 2 year deal, but I feel like he's going to resign with the Phillies. It just feels better for Bader not to hit free agency. As good a year as Bader had, I feel like he's just going to hit. I feel like it's just better for him to resign. He's in a great position in Philly, even though they got eliminated again. I just don't see the option for Bader becoming available, in which case there is no other options on the center field market. It is a very light position for free agent targets. And unless you want to platoon like Taylor with somebody again, there's really nothing to do at this position. So you looked to trade, and as it turns out, there is a team that's interested in Vientos as a trade target who has a center fielder to deal away, and that is Luis Robert Jr. on the Chicago White Sox. And I also looked at Dalton Varsho, but it doesn't feel like the Blue Jays are going to be parting with Varsho, and Varsho is going to be a free agent anyway after next season. So either Varsho is going to extend his contract and stay in Toronto, or Varsho is going to hit free agency. Either way, they don't need to be making a trade for him, and he would probably take a lot more than Vientos to pry away Varsho from the Blue Jays. So rather than do any of that, let's look at Luis Robert Jr. Luis Robert Jr. went from one of the most exciting, fascinating players, guy who looked like he was going to be multi-time All-Star for the next few years, as recently as like 2 years ago, to a guy who is a unbelievably a sharp and massive decline on the part of Robert Jr. And if you look at his like peripheral stats, nothing's really changed in terms of like his like chase rate and walk rate. Nothing changes for him in terms of that. His bat speed is still the same. He's just not making contact anymore. And this is more of like an approach situation, if anything. I feel like that if Robert Jr. just changed his swing or stance or wherever it is, if he can get out of Chicago and find some place where they can kind of fix him. This might be the Mets. It may not be the Mets. But if the Mets actually make this trade to acquire Robert Jr. and deal with Vientos, who the White Sox have expressed interest in the past. I don't know if they're still going to be interested in him, but if they are still interested in making that kind of trade where they would deal with Vientos and probably someone else, maybe Luis Acuna Jr., maybe Ronnie Mauricio, or possibly another prospect. But if the Mets can do that kind of trade and get Vientos off this team and bring in Robert Jr. Robert Jr., as much as his offensive game has declined, is still a fantastic center fielder. One of the best center fielders in baseball. I think he led the league in range factor, according to the baseball stats reference, baseball reference, defensive advanced stats that are listed for him. So just terrific range in center field, which is a must with this defensive outfield that they have right now with Soto and Nimmo. Nimmo is still fine enough in left field, but his defense is declining fast, and at some point they have to figure out what to do about Nimmo. But at some point they're going to have to figure out if they want to keep Nimmo in left field, and if they're going to have to figure out if they want to keep Soto in right field. For now, let's assume that both those guys are still in their positions. You need a center fielder out there who can make up for their defensive shortcomings, and particularly on Soto's part, Soto, the worst right fielder in baseball, and as much as he's improved, which is not a lot, he really needs help. He needs someone to kind of cover him and make sure that he doesn't have to go over to right field, like into center field as much. If he has a quality center fielder out there, it really helps. So it definitely benefits Soto to have someone like Luis Robert Jr. out there. Not to mention the hopefully, if Robert Jr. can figure it out and come anywhere close to his 2023 form, it's a slam dunk of a trade. And the White Sox want to get Robert Jr. out of here. He's not somebody who's particularly helpful for them anymore. Obviously, his offense has declined a lot, but he also has two club options, one of which they're going to have to enact for 2026, and the Mets are going to have to eat all that contract, even if they're going to be totally. There's no way that they look at that contract and say, this is not doable. It's like $20 million. Make the trade. Bring that guy in here. He's also a great base runner. Stole, I think, 30 bases again last year. So a multi-useful player, a guy who's just not really hitting well, but you already had that with Tyrone Taylor, and so at least you get the guy who has the potential to be more than that. Tyrone Taylor's never going to be more than a like 8 or 9 home run hitter. With Robert Jr., at least has the ability to hit 20 plus home runs if you start him out there every day. And again, as just as good a defensive player and just as good a base runner as Tyrone Taylor. So it just feels like a slam dunk, and you get Vientos out of there, and it might cost you someone like Acuna or Mauricio or another prospect. But that's worth it to do. That's worth it to do, to bring in a quality guy like this guy, who can defend that position as well as he can, but also has the power hitting potential as well. So I got 3 more moves here. I know this has been going on for a while that I've been talking, and frankly I want to stop talking because my voice is absolutely trashed. But I got 3 more moves here that involve one more trade and 2 more signings. So let's get to the trade one first. Jeff McNeil, adios. And it really hurts because between 2019 and 2022, Jeff McNeil was one of my favorite players. Since then, it has just been this long, slow, they really need to get this guy off the team type of situation, because when Jeff McNeil is good, I think a really positive clubhouse influence. When he is not doing well, he is the epitome of a toxic influence on that clubhouse. He is such a misanthropic asshole that you can see it just watching him. You're like, this guy looks absolutely miserable. He's got to be miserable to be around when the team's not doing well, and when he's not doing well especially. So McNeil is not the worst player in the world. I think he's still at a guy who can get you a 3 WAR, and there are going to be teams that are going to be interested in acquiring somebody like McNeil, who plays pretty solid defense. He has multiple position versatility. Stuff like that is great, but get him off this team. I'm really done. I'm really tired of McNeil being out there, and we've discovered through Brett Beatty can play the second base position and play it pretty well. I mean, give him another year to kind of to work on his game out there. He has great range, good glove, and improvements can definitely be made to his defense, but I think Beatty is young enough to do it, and Beatty has the power that can bring the power numbers that McNeil just isn't bringing. And you might say oh well, it's not enough all about power. What about the fact that this is a guy who's a former batting champion? He hasn't sniffed 300 since 2022. He's nowhere near being that kind of player anymore, and you're really just paying for the pass at this point. His contract is not unmovable. It's $15 million a year. Deal him away, and bring in somebody else. And I don't care what you bring in. Maybe it's a reliever. Maybe you package him with Sproat and someone else for Alcantara. Maybe he's part of the deal for someone like Logan Webb. Whatever the circumstances are, get him as far away from this team as possible, and just install Brett Beatty as your full-time second baseman. The other move that they can go with, and they could just keep Beatty at third base, which is his natural position. I'm totally good with it. But if you want to bring in another power hitter here, I'm actually interested in them bringing in Eugenio Suarez. And Suarez is not long for third base. They can go a couple of routes here. They can either sign Suarez, who is one of the best power hitters in baseball over the last few seasons, basically a lock for 40 home runs a year. Suarez, you can move him. You can either keep him at third, where he's not terrible, but is declining fast, and at his age, he's not going to be getting any better. So if you had a problem with Pete Alonso at first base, you're not going to feel great about Suarez either at third. So they can either keep Beatty at second, sign Suarez to play third, or you can move Suarez over to first base, where his glove may actually play a lot better at first base. I'm not saying it's a great move, but it's one move that they can go that route. The only issue is that at second base, you have to figure out the position. You can either use one of the guys you didn't trade off, like Mauricio or Acuna, at second base for now. But the future of that position is probably either Beatty or Jet Williams. In AAA, Jet Williams had an outstanding season. Williams has the power and the speed, it looks like, to be their long-term option. I also forgot to mention for center field, Luis Robert Jr., if things don't work out with him, They also have Carson Benj in AAA, and Benj is going to start the year in AAA. He didn't hit particularly well after he got called up from AA, but he needs a little bit more time in the oven down in AAA to kind of cook properly here, and but the future is the potential is just massive with Benj, and he has the look, apparently, of being the full-time center fielder for this team going forward. The power, the speed, an outstanding throwing arm in center field. The potential here is huge with him, and acquiring Robert Jr. doesn't limit them in any way because, again, they only have control of him for 2 years, and they can cut him at any point because they have the club option for him in both seasons. So that's another feather in the cap. I think, in my estimation, is he bring in a good player, and if it doesn't work out for him, it's no big deal. You're not tied to him for very long. So Ben's future at center field. Jet Williams probably the future at second base here, unless they trade Jet Williams, and then you keep Beatty at third base, or you move Suarez to third and you put Beatty at second base, and maybe Jet Williams gets traded, or you move Suarez over to first base. Either way, Pete Alonso is not anywhere in this infield, but you get a really good player in Suarez to be playing at third, to be playing at either third or first, who can hit his weight. Again, there has been very few power hitters in the league who've been better than Suarez. I think it's like Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani who've hit more home runs in the last couple seasons, and maybe Kyle Schwarber. But this is, I think, a slam dunk. He's not a guy who's going to cost particularly a lot. He's older. He's 34, I think, 33. And the contract would be short term, most likely, maybe 2 years, for a high enough AAV, let's say $20 million a year. For Suarez, I think he does that. I think 2 years, like $45 million, is definitely doable with someone like Suarez, and it's a contract that would definitely pay off because they're just bringing him in here to hit home runs. They just need somebody to cover Alonso and Nimmo in that 4 or 5 hole. And Suarez can definitely do that. They really need right-handed power hitting. They have a lot of left-handed power hitting, not as much right-handed power hitting. So bring in someone like that. And if they ultimately go the route of keeping Beatty at second and Suarez at third base, you can go and find someone else at first base. Someone who's hitting free agency is going to be Ryan O'Hearn. Ryan O'Hearn, most recently on the San Diego Padres, but had been on the Orioles the past couple of years. And Ryan O'Hearn is a terrific first baseman. Not like a Gold Glove caliber first baseman, but if you look at his peripherals, fielding wise, for the last couple of years with Baltimore, he didn't play that much first base with San Diego. They were set at first, but he played a little bit more right field. He's not really good at the outfield position. Really good at first base, and is like a 15 to 20 home run hitter. He's had an interesting career. A guy who looked like he had massive potential but didn't really pan out, and came to Baltimore and hit for a little bit more power in the hitter's park like that it was. Then was traded off to San Diego, and it wasn't like amazing, and to the point that no one's really going to be that interested in O'Hearn as a full-time player. But O'Hearn signing like a 1-year deal for like $8 million. Basically, at the very worst, he's replacing Jesse Winker in this case. And even if he doesn't play every day, even if they don't ultimately sign him to be the starting first baseman, he has a benefit there of being a guy who can fill in at that role, or be a guy off the bench, or play some DH, whatever you want to do for him in this case. It kind of works to have that guy around. So there are a ton of possibilities for that Met infield to improve, and basically anything that improves this team's defense, which was very bad. They had a lot of really bad defensive play across the board. They need to improve it. In this way, I think you get a guy who can hit for a lot of power in Suarez. You get a guy who can play the position at first base, either with Suarez at first, or you get Ryan O'Hearn. And then you have a huge defensive improvement at center field with Robert Jr.
And you get a couple guys who need to be out of here in Vientos and Jeff McNeil. I have no problem letting either of those guys go, and I also have no problem if they have to deal with someone like Acuna Jr. or Mauricio, guys who also have not really panned out, but might be interesting to other teams. So that was a lot. I admit like some of these options are maybe a little bit more pie in the sky, but ultimately I feel very confident in these. If the team went this route and ultimately brought in these guys, this is a team that's two good pitchers, and two like good replacements for that lineup and infield and outfield defense from being a 90 plus win team. That is the truth, because they have enough assets already on this team that won 83 games. They have enough assets here, and there are going to be a lot of players who are going to be interested in having Juan Soto batting in front of them, like to potentially improve themselves, like Alonso did. There was a lot of questions here. There's going to be a ton of time for Stearns to kind of peruse this, and he has a lot of options at least to go through trades and make moves in free agency. He's going to be very busy. This is going to be a crazy busy offseason for the Mets, and I'm very interested to see the moves that he makes. If it doesn't play out exactly like I just outlined here, I mean, okay, but if you can find comparable assets to what I just suggested and projected, if he can figure out those moves himself that are similar to these, I'm also interested in that as well. But this is going to be such an important offseason for this team to improve themselves. Is absolutely essential. They cannot be going in with that same group that just kind of collapsed like it did in 2025. He needs to figure out what he was doing wrong here, and I think that involves going after players who don't have quite as many question marks. And what I suggested, there are certainly players who have question marks, but there's fewer question marks than there would be if they just run it back. Thank you for listening to Mike's Mets Podcast. If you haven't already, please follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Leave a like and a comment, it helps so much. Finally, please follow our Twitter and Blue Sky pages. You can find us at Twitter at Mike's Mets Pod, all one word, and on Blue Sky at Mike's Mets Podcast.bsky.social. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day or evening, and let's go Mets.